Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Linda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Susan and Lisa will continue their conversation about the article from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, Is Loneliness Worse Than Smoking for College Students? Hillary will join me to answer a question from Megan from Arizona, and she has a question about the ACT writing score and whether it can be submitted to show her students' strength in writing. Rick Clark from Georgia Tech is back, and he's teaching us what's the proper way to respond if you get denied? And what's the proper way to respond if you get waitlisted by a school? And we'll have the final part of Linda and Lisa's College Spotlight, breaking down DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. Friends, on my way back from my Virginia, North Carolina college visits, I spent 2 days in South Carolina, visited a few colleges there, and had a chance to go to dinner with the family that I'm working with, who also is a regular podcast listener. And this family challenged me. They said, Mark, at that time we were up to episode 490. They said, what are you going to do for episode 500? And I said, well, I don't know. I hadn't really given it much thought. But I had an epiphany. It popped in my head. And I want to ask a favor of you guys, our listeners. What I'd love for you to do is go to speakpipe.com and record something that you've learned from this podcast that's helped you in a significant way. Anything that's helped you in a significant way, where you had that epiphany or the lights came on, or something that you share with your student or you share with other parents. And I'd like to play them. So we all can learn from each other. So can you do that for us? Just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK. You'll see a big orange record button. You just push record. You have up to 5 minutes. Chat away so that we all can learn what you've learned, so that each one can reach one and be a listening family. So that's what I'd love to do for episode 500. Can you help us out?
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
We know what mom said to her son at a point in his life when, she didn't like the way he was behaving. And you know what? I've been thinking a lot about that. And, that's not all that bad, but it also creates, a whole nother level of intrusiveness into, but in a way, very positive. But kids do need, we know that when kids are 17 and 18, they aren't fully formed. And as we have kind of developmentally taken a fair amount away from them, that's why I think families need to be more intentional. And Kafka and Stripling point this out about, being intentional so that when they get to a university campus, it's not the first time they've tried something and not been the best at it. Here in the Philadelphia area where I live, we have a couple of universities where the self-harm rate it's either skyrocketed or it's never been public before. You have to think of it that way too, is like, did we just not know how many kids were, harming themselves or dropping out for mental health reasons from these high-powered, big name colleges and universities? Or is it just now that we know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the stakes are higher. When a student comes to me and says, I want to be pre-med, I I'm very happy now to list the schools where I don't think they should consider. And I never used to do that. I made them discover it on their own. But now I feel like I need to point out there are some universities that have they're not going to recommend all the students to medical school. They're going to let the students basically eliminate each other. And by the third semester, they'll let you know whether or not you're going to be recommended. Think of the pressure. I would want my child to go to a college that said, we're going to support all of you. We're going to do everything we can to help you reach your goals. And no promises, but we're on your side. The faculty is not the enemy.
Right.
And some kids, some of the students at my school would say, no, I love that kind of competitive environment. And they're chomping at the bit to get into that kind of, sink or swim environment because they're sure they're going to swim and that they'll make sure others don't swim with them. And that's where I feel you get into a very bad social situation where it's competition and not collaboration.
And I suppose there are some things worse than loneliness. No, like you could be interacting with people all day long, but if it's very negative and toxic, that's probably your 15 cigarettes right there. I think that you bring up this great point about consequences and mistakes, because I think like if you are going to be connected to everyone forever in one way or another because you're friends on Snapchat or Instagram, like there are no mistakes that you feel you can make that will ever be forgotten. So you and I might have been like, oh, well, that was camp and I did something stupid and I'm never going to see those people again and it's going to be fine. That is probably not the experience of younger people because they're always going to be connected. And then, obviously the increased pressures on high school students to achieve more, to, as you said, like, why are these kids doing academic college research in high school? I don't think it's for fun for most of them. It's because they feel like they have to get ahead. Like that in and of itself, like the stakes are very high. And you don't have time just to blow it off and go like do something stupid at the mall. So it's just, I think kids are like kind of in a bind with that.
Well, and too many families, I think, are measuring the value of activities beginning in middle school and high school. They're being told with their middle schoolers that they've got to start specializing. I remember, my twins are out of college a few years, but I remember when my son was in middle school, he was a very well-rounded athlete, not a superstar, but he could play anything. And I remember an adult man playing tennis with him once when we were on summer vacation. And this is to an 8th grader. And he said, to my son, what sports do you play? And my son said, oh, soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And then on the summer I play tennis. And he says, well, you have to stop. You have to stop now. You have the potential to be a very high-end tennis player. You could play D1. But you've got to stop all those other sports now. And it's actually a little late. And Hamilton, my son, was flattered, but we talked about it. And he's like, but all my sports are fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? And I said, that's your answer. That,
yeah.
And he was looking to me in a way to see whether it mattered to me. And I thought, well, would it be fun to have a superstar child, on the circuit? And I'm like, no, being in education, I don't know. That was okay. There wasn't enough payoff. Now, some of our listeners who maybe have extremely high talent, junior Olympic caliber kids who are doing the same sport 4 seasons a year, more power to you. That there's a place for those.
And there's a community. There's a community in sports, I think.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hillary.
Hi.
Glad to have you back. I'm really loving having these conversations with you.
Me too.
I'm going to ask you again. You know that, right?
I love it. I'm so glad to talk about this stuff.
Good, because you're definitely going to get asked again. So we have a question from Megan from Arizona. I'm going to play it, and then I'm going to let you address it.
Okay.
Hi, Mark and team. This is Megan from Arizona. I'm an avid listener and can't thank you enough for the invaluable insights you provide on the college search and application process. My question is about the honors section of the Common App. My daughter is a senior applying to 5 schools, 2 of which are highly selective. She took both the SAT and ACT, but she'll only be submitting her SAT scores, which were much higher than her ACT scores. However, she did score in the 99th percentile nationally on the essay writing section of the ACT. I know it's not an award, but since it was a noteworthy national rank, is there any reason we couldn't just list her ACT writing score on the honors section, or is that a really big no-no if we aren't submitting her official ACT scores? Another reason we'd like to find a way to slip it in is because she only scored a 3 on the AP English Language and Comp exam, and we thought that noting her ACT writing score might be good to show another standardized data point on her writing skills. She doesn't have any unique reason explaining her AP score, she just ran out of time. If she shouldn't include her ACT writing score on the honors section, would it be worth noting it in the additional information section? Or should we just not mention it anywhere since she will not be submitting her overall ACT scores? I appreciate your thoughts.
Where do you want to go with this one?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, I know this feeling because my own kiddo did much better on the ACT writing or essay than she did on any of her other testing. But I would just say don't overthink this. Like, you have a space to put in the SAT scores, which are the student's best overall scores. Go ahead and do that. And I think that the student's strength of writing is going to probably come through in their essay. It's going to be talked about in teacher recommendations. Your readers are going to know how strong the student's writing is based on the application alone. So I just wouldn't worry about trying to find space in the application to include the ACT essay score. What do you think, Mark?
Same thing. I mean, if one of my students wrote that in the additional information section, I would encourage them not to include it. I always say this with additional information. I love additional information, but I try to say to students, admission officers are under pressure to read a lot of applications in a short period of time. And anything, if you're going to make the application thicker, the bar is higher. Like there has to be a certain value for you to have somebody go in beyond in terms of spend more of their time on something. And I just don't think that juice is worth its squeeze. So I can understand totally from a parent perspective why they would want, gee, I feel like one of my kids' best strengths isn't getting represented. So I think it's a great question. And I'm glad it was asked because I think that a lot of people probably feel the same way. But it's just not that important enough to a college to be something that you would go above and beyond and highlight. I'm sure if it's in honors, it would probably just get read so quickly and overlooked and not even somebody wouldn't even think anything about it. But it's certainly not going to be distinctive and be like, oh, I'm glad that got included there. Certainly not. That wouldn't happen. So, and it's just, I don't know. I just don't see value to it. And I really can't see, I feel pretty strongly about it, but you're the one reading now. So I respect your opinion highly.
Yeah, and I don't think it would hurt. I mean, I don't think it would hurt the student if there were a line in the additional information section about it. I'm not going to, I don't know. Like, it's not going to make me think differently, probably in a good or a bad way about the student. The thing is that so much of our review ends up becoming like we rate students in different areas. The grades and the test scores are included as a rating. It all becomes numbers, right? And there's nowhere to plug in this particular number. And so then in order to use it, I'm going to have to write about it in the review and use it as a point of advocacy. And it's just not going to be as strong a point of advocacy as being able to describe the student's writing from having read it myself. So it just sort of is like a little bit, it becomes sort of an awkward piece, I think, of the application that just doesn't move the application forward.
Yeah, and I mean, and I know not everybody feels this way, but there's a reason why the writing portion sort of lost its luster.
Right.
Right? And it's because a lot of people just didn't find it to be predictive and to be that revealing of value. And I'm not only referring to the ACT here, but from 2005 to 2016, the SAT went from 1600 to 2400 and had a whole 800 point uh, writing section that was in there. And then that, it was not arbitrary that the test moved away from that. It's because people were not finding that to be helpful enough to justify that. So I just don't find from the admission officers that I interact with that they see great value in that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll hear somebody say something to the contrary. I remember one school saying that they didn't like that decision. Their own internal research indicated that there was value there, and they didn't agree with that. But that's way much. That's so much an outlier. So I think just that overall sense of that writing score. I think what you said is true, which is I'd rather just look at your writing and make my evaluation of how. And the other thing I do want to say is, even for pretty selective schools, having an occasional 3 isn't the end of the world on an AP exam. It just really isn't. Like, I mean, it's hard to unpack this because it's so different from school to school. I certainly know schools that I would advise against somebody sharing 3s, but really selective schools like UCLA and UNC Chapel Hill, they like 3s on APs. They like that. They would tell anybody, share your 3. So I don't want people to think a 3 is the end of the world. And I know we've had some conversations around scores before, and I've sometimes referenced what some of the most selective schools like Stanford had encouraged me to not have my students share their 3s, and I've shared things like that. I don't want to give the impression that a 3 is a bad score.
Yeah.
And so, and I get how 99th percentile sounds so much more impressive than a 3, so I get it. But
I also think like you're probably like, if you were going to share the score, you probably wouldn't be sharing that I scored in the 99th percentile. You would actually be sharing the raw score. And frankly, as an admission rep, I'm not going to remember because we don't look at those individual scores. So if you told, I can't even remember, is it out of 14 now or out of 12? I don't even remember. And so the raw score is going to be meaningless to me. And it would be sort of weird to have to tell an admission officer that I scored a 13 and that's in the 99th percentile nationwide. So like that sort of tells you how little meaning it has to us that we don't even know what the raw score represents.
yeah, I mean, I know this is a bad example, but the thought that came to my mind was almost like how colleges don't like grade grubbers. It almost has a little bit of a grade grubber thing. Like you think this thing is super important and it's kind of not. But your point was well taken. I'm sure it wouldn't hurt someone. If it was going to be listed, it certainly wouldn't want someone to spend a whole lot of time going on and on about it.
Yeah.
But I would not advise my students to include it.
Yeah.
In the counseling
I
room.
would encourage the student to feel really proud of themselves because it is hard to get that score. And they are obviously a good writer, probably an excellent writer based on that score. And that should be a point of pride for the student. And you should then think about, because I know that I'm a great writer, now what? Like, what does that mean for me? Can I take some more English classes? Can I really lean into this? Could I maybe be a peer tutor when I get to college? Because obviously you're a talented writer. So I think that there are some really good things to think about, like in the so what realm from this score. Including
Sure.
it in your application is probably not one of those, but I do think that it should encourage the student to use that talent that they have to do another cool thing.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that because the thing I didn't like about this question is I didn't want to be negative and I didn't want to be negative, and I think there's a lot to celebrate here, and I think you found a really good way to articulate that. It should feel good. It's not easy. 99% means you're in the top 1%.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so that is something that you should feel really good about.
Yeah,
And
I think our system just isn't set up to recognize it.
Yep, exactly. But it might have ramifications for other things that either gifts and talents that you have or other courses that you might want to take that are in line with some of your gifts and talents. So yeah, it's worth some reflection on what does this say about me, and there's probably something there that's worth thinking on and applying in some way to your life.
Definitely.
And even besides just feeling good about yourself, like what does this say about some of my giftedness that might that might have other applications in other areas. Are you someone who would want to get involved with school newspapers or, there's a lot to think on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Awesome. Well, Megan, thank you. And thank you for your kind words about our podcast as well. So keep sending in questions. I hope you're not discouraged. Yeah. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, Rick Clark is back, and Rick Clark's the Executive Director of Strategic Student Access at Georgia Tech. And this week we're talking all things denials and waitlists. In other words, what are the proper ways to handle it? So Rick will answer the question, what are some misperceptions about why students are denied? What are some ways students and parents respond to denials? And what is your advice about how to properly handle a denial? He'll talk about how a waitlist is different from a deferral. That's something people confuse a lot. So you're going to want to hear that. What are the different reasons schools waitlist students? And what is his advice about how to properly handle a waitlist decision? Listen and enjoy. Well, let's transition to denials. What would you say are some misperceptions about the reasons for denials? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that again is sort of the rule of admission in general. And somebody said this recently that I thought was very wise and dead on, which is like the way that an admission decision feels is very different than the way it's made, and that is so accurate. Honestly, right now we are denying kids that are smarter at 17 than I will ever be in my life. And it is this is not a value judgment. This is not some like forecasting of future success. Some of it is just supply and demand, and some of it is institutional priorities. We've got kids that I know we're denying who are going to get in to schools that are ranked higher than we are, that a lot of people would, and we get these calls all the time. Like, how can you deny, I can't believe you denied my kid. They got into X, right? And X school is perceived to be better or whatever. And it's like, well, it just wasn't for us. That wasn't the right fit and match, or we've got so many, and it sounds crazy to people that look just like this. And so for us, that's really not unique, and that's not a must in our applicant pool, whereas it very well could be for, that other amazing school. And I guess one of the big things that we try to, I know you do this too, just turn people's attention to is, man, focus on your wins. Focus on your opportunities. And I think that's something families will dwell on a little bit is, okay, it didn't work out here, but man, look at the opportunities and choices that we do have. And, I think the schools and the institutions do the same thing. Like, I try not to focus on the 31,000 we don't take, but the 7,000 that we do.
Yeah, and I find a lot of the misperceptions around denials, a lot of it is what you said, like they got in so-and-so school and they're more selective. A lot of times I find it's numbers based too. In other words, like my kids or my test scores are above your averages or above what you publish. Or particularly for kids that have really stratospheric scores, they seem to think that automatically means they're admitted. Do you encounter that at all?
Oh, yeah. Actually, last year we created for April Fools, we created sort of a fake profile. And honestly, I wish that we could use this all the time, but it basically was like, and for people that aren't familiar, like school profiles or admitted profiles, like usually these are like middle 50% range. It's kind of what you're describing, right? Where you say, oh, our middle 50% SAT is between a 1340 and a 1470. And so to your point, you've got this family sitting there with a 1520 thinking we're good to go. Or it says like we're between a 3.5 and a 3.8. And that's trying to give people a guide, it's trying to give people a generally competitive profile. It's by no means a guarantee. Well, last year we did this April Fool's profile that said, test scores really high, GPA, GPA, amazing, rigor of curriculum, absolutely, and I kind of wish that we could use that because the intent with those profiles is always to be helpful. But I think that people ascribe so much value to it as, like a bar to jump. And when that doesn't come through, from a numeric standpoint, it feels like it's not fair. It feels like there was sort of this guarantee that's being pulled back. And truly, when all these schools are using holistic review, all they're really doing is sort of demonstrating that they were serious about holistic review. It's not just going to be about the numbers.
Yeah, and because I'm in the admission office, what did I reach out and grab? I grabbed the Georgia Tech profile. So I'm holding it here. And I have a question for you. It wasn't one we had talked about before, but I think it's apropos to our conversation. So I'm looking here, Georgia Tech, 1400 to 1520, middle 25th to 75th SAT, 3134 ACT, GPA A. So one thing I've encountered with a lot of highly selective schools is in the same way where people feel like, well, if I'm above 1520, I'm definitely in, or I'm above a 34. But the opposite's also true, right? Where people think, well, there's no use me applying because I don't have a 1400 SAT or I don't have a 31 ACT. I'm sure you encounter that a lot as well. Any comments on that, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, and that's
no use even applying because I don't have that number.
Right. And that's the other downside of publishing those, honestly. And in some ways, I feel like that's the worst side of it because, our conversations, if you, like I said, if you had gotten here 30 minutes earlier and just walked into that same room, what you would have been hearing is, basically like, we go so fast past the test scores. Like it's gotten to the point now where you're like, it's a 13 something, it's a 14 something, it's a 15 something, and basically it's implying like, what else, okay, so the test scores are good. They're fine, and people aren't really naming them specifically anymore. I think people believe that these are like rungs on a ladder and one is just absolutely incrementally higher, better, it gives you a leg up, so to speak. And that's really not true. I mean, the vast majority of our conversation surrounds, impact and influence and, fit to major and fit to Georgia Tech and, really spending time on what are they doing outside the classroom and what does that writing say about their desire to come here? Because there's so much noise in those numbers. And so, yeah, the student you're describing concerns me, honestly, that a student would look at that. They probably don't have great counseling. They often don't have, some of the parental sort of background and understanding and savvy to say, no, like, let's give it a shot, 25% of students, if you read that profile correctly, were admitted with below that bottom number. And so that's a lot of students, right, who didn't have those numbers on that page.
No, I'm so glad you said that, Rick, because I cannot tell you how many times I work with a student that has high testing. And I think it reminds me of what you said, that kid that's always achieved everything, that, they're very driven and their numbers may already be in the 1400s and they feel they need to keep going back. I actually had a kid this year close to mid 1500s wanting to retest, and that's just ridiculous, and so I think people need to hear you say that in the role that you're at. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good stuff. So let's talk about some other ways in which people process denials. Good ways, bad ways. Someone gets a denial. What's your advice to someone?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest is back to your dating analogy. It's like, in a way, sort of be thankful that the Band-Aid's been ripped off, right? I mean, that did not work out. And here's, I guess, one of the first things I would say is it's probably not going to work out. Like all schools have an appeal process, but it almost never is a valid appeal. And so like we try to be specific about what is and is not a valid appeal. And it's like, if you had a major medical situation that you didn't tell us about, if we got the wrong transcript, if some huge hole was there that really was not of your own doing, okay, let's at least hear about that. But in 99% of the cases, those appeals, just because you really want to go there, or this is the only place you applied to. I mean, like, that is not a valid appeal. And so one of the first things I would say is, most of the time you need to say, it is over. I am moving on. I have a lot of other schools that I'm excited about, and I'm just going to focus my attention there. And I mean, but just as much as we said, like, you got to celebrate all your wins when you get in, no matter where you get in, first choice, last choice, third choice, whatever, like, get excited about that and, celebrate that and look back and, appreciate all the work it took to get that. And I think the same thing is true, when you get denied, like, it's okay to be upset for a little while. Like, I think that's kind of crazy for us to just say, move on, or what I just said, rip the Band-Aid off and be happy about it. Like, it's okay to take a day or two to just sort of sulk if you need to, like, go for a walk or go for a long drive or go out to the movies or whatever makes you feel better. Like, that's okay. I mean, you wanted something, it's not going to work out. Process that however you need to, but pretty quickly turn around and say, okay, what's next? Do I need to put in some more applications? Do I need to, depending on what time of year that is, or do I need to just get really excited about a couple of these schools that have already admitted me, or start to work on some of the scholarship applications for the schools that, I think are really viable? Those are some of the things I would point to.
Do you think, Rick, because it's the early phase now, so there are quite a few students that have applied early action, early decision, that may have not gotten in. Do you think students, particularly maybe if they're not working with either, a school counselor or an independent, should they take that as an indication that they may be applying to, they might want to have some schools on their list that aren't quite as selective? I mean, I know that's a pretty loaded question because hopefully you had an initial list that was balanced, but yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree. I hope that, that it was a balanced list and you already have that. But it was pretty funny because I was talking to a counselor the other day who said that the student didn't get in, and I'll just name names here, didn't get into Carnegie Mellon. And so got an email from the mother, after the student had found this out saying, do you think we should add Harvard to the list now? It's like, that is, I mean, I told him, I was like, man, I hope you took a deep breath and didn't reply that night, because there's like 100 thoughts that go through my head when I hear that. It just sounds so absurd. So the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. I mean, if you didn't get into a place, if you got just straight denied or honestly even deferred, like, you need to reassess the list of schools that you've applied to and make sure that there are a couple that have lower and sometimes maybe even significantly lower admit rate, or has higher admit rates and lower admitted student profiles to give yourself, again, options. And it's just what it's all about.
Yeah, and I share this story with people. I don't want to freak them out, but I got a call last year from a student. It's a school in Cobb County, big school in Cobb County, one of these schools that has over 650 kids in their senior class. And the student was ranked number 2 and didn't get in anywhere. And people freak out. Well, everybody told the kid how smart they were. So, what did they have? It was Stanford, it was Yale, and it was all schools like that. And it's just a case of, if you don't have a balanced list, you might be exceptional and there's no guarantees.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. That is true. The only guarantee is there are no guarantees.
There you go. Taxes and death, maybe.
Right.
So let's transition. Let's talk about wait lists. And why don't you start us off by differentiating wait lists and deferrals, because that can be confusing, because obviously there's some similarities, but there's a reason why we have it in its own bucket.
Yeah.
Some differences as well.
Yeah. So again, deferral is going to be, students who had applied in an earlier round, be that EDEA or any derivation thereof, right? There's a bunch of them now. And so again, that's the wait, that's the hold on, that's the tell us more. It is an opportunity for kids to send fall grades. It is an opportunity sometimes, depending on the school, send another essay or update them on what they've been doing outside the classroom, maybe even have an interview. Waitlist is in a lot of ways very similar, but the idea is that would be coming in the next round in March or April when schools release out of their regular round. Obviously, like the seventh layer of admission purgatory is when you get deferred and then waitlisted, but we're not gonna go there now.
Yeah, no.
And no one likes that, man. I mean, that kind of sucks all around. I mean, we don't like doing it. I wish I was smarter and could figure out a way to never have that happen. Nobody likes having that happen, but anyway, the idea of waitlist is again, I mean, frankly, it is schools making sure that they're going to get the class that they need. And so they look at their whole pool at that point and they say, here's our admits. These are the kids 100% that we want to be here. Here's our denies. These are the kids 100% that we know that either aren't competitive, and there's certainly some of those, or they just aren't going to be as competitive, and we know that we're not going to ever offer them admission, right? In this year, in this applicant pool. Doesn't mean they're not smart or capable or going to have a great other options, but it's not happening, and we know that. The waitlist group then is that sort of middle group where they say, it could work out. And it is basically like schools protecting themselves and cushioning themselves. And they've got, we're all operating off of these formulas. We're basically operating off of these yield models that have been based on historical data. And to the best of our ability, this is a Georgia Tech example, a Georgia kid, a Georgia resident generally yields at 68%. Whereas a student from out of state generally yields at 25, 26%. Now, that depends on state, depends on major. There's some factors. But broadly speaking, that's the case. Well,
hey, Rick, let me interrupt you for 1 sec. We've defined this a lot, but I always want to keep in mind our first-time listener. Yield is just simply a mathematical formula. If a school accepts 100 students and the yield is 68%, that means 68 of those 100 will choose to matriculate and enroll, just in case someone doesn't know that. So, yeah, if you could pick that.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. I mean, the number of kids that say yes to your offer, or the percentage of kids that say yes to your offer. And so basically, what you do is that if you're trying to hit certain targets, as we described for tech on the geography side, but let's say a school, just added a new academic program, or they've decided that they can't get too many of this major, in the next year, right? They're just booming in that area and they need to curb that back. They're basing their offers off of history, and things change, right? I mean, in the first year of the new presidential administration, most schools around the country took a hit from international students. Their yield rate for international students went down. And so, things change, and you build models off of what you know, but you also give yourself the waitlist cushion for if things shift and you need to fill certain buckets or certain holes. And so that's one of the things families should know with the waitlist too, is it's not ranked, right? We don't say there's 1,000 kids on our waitlist and you are number 438. It's not like a line to get into a restaurant or, something like that. It is a way that schools build and shape their class based on where they might miss their targets once May 1st hits, and that deposit deadline hits. The other thing about waitlist, the biggest thing about waitlist, two things. One, in most cases, you're not actually on the waitlist. You've been offered the waitlist, and you need to do something like claim your spot, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes families miss that step, even though we say it in a lot of ways. But you got to claim your spot on the waitlist. But the other thing is, because financial packages and other schools' offers, and frankly, just human natural procrastination, means that a lot of kids don't deposit until late April. And so because May 1's that national deposit deadline, the other thing you got to do if you get waitlisted is put your money down somewhere else. You have to cover your bases. And I do think that this is back to your question earlier about like emotions. This is a hard spot because you have to start to get excited about somewhere else, but yet know like it could work out. And man, this is why no one loves the waitlist. In fact, A couple of years ago, I wrote a 3-part series on my blog called "The Waitlist Sucks" because there's just no other way to put it. That is just the most accurate way to put it.
Yeah, and I think do you guys share your numbers when they're released, either in a newspaper article or on your website?
We give historical numbers. Yeah, we try to be helpful there.
Because I do think that's helpful for people, because sometimes people stereotype and they say, if it's a highly selective school and your wait list or deferred, then your chances are slim to none. But actually, that can vary so much from school to school, depending on their process and their year, right? I've seen some really, really highly selective schools that take a sizable chunk off their wait list. And then there's others that take slim to none. And then I think that can help people to at least emotionally prepare. Hopefully people are reasonable enough to see that, okay, if 3% of kids are getting it off the wait list, then, I can't really throw all my eggs in that basket.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's right.
Rick, can you comment on the practice of waitlisting kids you would have admitted, but because you don't think the student is going to come, or you're not sure if they're going to come, they get waitlisted? And the school sort of lets the student prove to the college or university that they really want to come to the school. As you know, some schools use waitlists to increase their yield, and I want to know just what you think about this.
So in terms of schools that are waitlisting students who they don't think is going to come, I do think that's actually happening. I will say that's not something that we will do here at Georgia Tech. We take who we want to take, and we waitlist who we would like to take if we could. But I do think that you're right, that certainly there are some schools that are waitlisting students to have them demonstrate interest or prove it. And they do that by putting them on the waitlist, see if they accept a spot in the waitlist, and then often will go even earlier than late April in order to bolster yield. So basically, they are doing this as an opportunity to get a higher yield for their class. And the one thing I can say about that is you can get a sense, at least in my opinion, of some of the schools that are doing this by looking over the history of what they've done in the past. If you're seeing some schools that are going in mid-April or sometimes even early April to their wait list, you know that they're doing that. And so that is one way for students to know if a school either kind of has this practice or now, of course, that's not going to show whether or not you're going to be one of the students to get pulled. But again, I guess my take on the entire admission process is if you get deferred and they ask you to do something and you're still interested, do it. If you get waitlisted and they ask you to do something, do it. And so it's not something you're going to know per se on what's going to happen in your particular case. But I do think that you will find some schools who sort of have this overall practice, they have this overall trend, and it's something that you can identify. Obviously, that's something to talk to a school counselor about, or if you're working with an independent counselor, talk to them about it. But even if you're not, it's something that a lot of students would be able to kind of go and research and figure out for themselves.
Rick, some schools use courtesy waitlists. I know we did this when I did boarding school admissions for alumni kids, for twins when we couldn't take one kid, for faculty kids, etc. Can you explain what a courtesy waitlist is and share your thoughts on whether a student can know if they're waitlisted, whether or not it's a legitimate waitlist or if it's of the courtesy variety? Because, of course, for courtesy waitlists, you're not going to get admitted.
Okay. What I would say about courtesy waitlists is that, yes, I think that, again, is something that schools do in certain cases, and obviously some to a greater extent than others. You could call this a soft no. You see this, I think, a lot of times when schools have just sort of ridiculously disproportionate wait lists. So, for instance, their entire class is going to be 1,000 and they have 4,000 on the wait list. Or they're making, 5,000 offers to get 2,500 on the wait list. Their entire class size is only 1,000. I think in those kind of cases, you're not going to necessarily know if you are a courtesy wait list, but it should, even if they're not giving you percentages of students or numbers of students they've taken off the wait list in the past, it'll give you a pretty realistic idea of whether or not it's going to be something that you should put a whole lot of hope in or stock in. And, frankly, again, this is one of those places where I feel like the college side is culpable for some of the anxiety and some of the misdirection and some of the maybe appropriate questioning of the process that we get. Because, if you've got 4 times the number of people on your wait list as you have in your class, you're either not very good at math or you're doing some things that are just unnecessary within your overall process.
Friends, this concludes part 2 of my interview with Rick Clark. Hope you join us next week for the final part, where he'll be talking about what's the proper way to handle an acceptance without being a jerk.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Friends, hopefully you heard the first part of Lisa and Linda talking about DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. It's now time for the final part.
But they have some other programs as well. They have a number of fellows programs that are competitive. And it's probably the media fellows program that is most competitive. And each of these will provide additional opportunities for students to dive deep in a topic. Some of them are going to have internships embedded. There will be lecture series. Many of them include a senior capstone. But there's a media fellows, management fellows, environmental, science research fellows, and then the global studies fellows. And these are open to any majors. So you can be a computer science major and still apply to be an environmental fellows. Career services, they have it. And they're going to help you out with resumes, interviews, all kinds of resources, help with internships. They do have an alumni gateway, and that's to help students connect with their alumni network and make those connections. Oh, AP credit. I did want to mention this. Mm-hmm. They do take AP credit, and you can have a maximum of 8 course credits through AP or dual enrollment.
So is that 8 courses or 8 hours?
8 course credits. So depends what the course is going to be. And some of them will allow you to place into a particular subject. So you just need to do your due diligence. For most of them, you're going to need a 4 or a 5, but there are a few instances where you can get credit or placement for 3 on an AP test. Additional centers, they have the Tensor Technology Center, and this is kind of like a collaborative maker space. And they have all kinds of workshops and short internships where students can work together and improve their tech skills. A Center for Contemporary Media, and this is where the WGRE radio station is housed. And it's one of the oldest student radio stations in the U.S. D3 TV is their streaming student television station. The college newspaper is housed there, along with a Midwestern Review, which is their literary magazine. They have the Hartman Center for Civic Engagement, and a lot of volunteer opportunities are organized through here, and they really encourage students to become active community members, not just on campus, but actually in the greater community. Their Center for Diversity and Inclusion, and then the Prindle Institute for Ethics, which supports ethics-related teaching and research, which sounds pretty interesting. Lisa, next up is your favorite thing, athletics.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you if they had those.
Yes, they do have them, beyond just that cricket club. So they are the Tigers, which totally makes sense because their colors are black and gold. I don't know which came first, the color scheme or the mascot, but it makes sense to me. They are D3 and the North Coast Athletic Conference. But really, when you're talking about DePauw athletics, I feel like you're talking about football. And really, you're talking about one game, the last game of the football season with, as they refer to them, that school up the road, which is Wabash College, which is a college for men just up the road. They have been playing, it is apparently one of the most storied rivalries in college athletics. They have been playing against each other for more than 100 years. I think they're at like game number, I think this year it's going to be 116 or 117.
Wow.
Yeah. So the final game of the season is for the Mannen bell, which is a literal 300-pound bell that they use as a traveling trophy. And I saw it because DePauw won the last game, and it's massive. And they tell stories about, the rival teams stealing it. It sounds like something out of Animal House, but that is a big rivalry. And so much so that last game of the season, they get like 11,000 spectators. There are less than 2,000 students at this school.
Yeah, so it's like the town of Greencastle comes out for that one.
Entire town is there. So, I mean, really, I don't know anybody who goes to DePauw right now, but I might go to the game. Just, sounds like it would be a good time. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so, you saw the town a little bit, you saw the campus. Like, what's like the town like? What does the campus look like? Just what's the vibe there?
So I did not see much of the town. I have to be honest. So this was on a tour, and we did
Sure,
not get to see
sure.
the town. But the campus it's eminently walkable, and it looks like that traditional kind of red brick campus. So very traditional looking, lovely green spaces, friendly, clean, well manicured. Sometimes you walk around a campus and you're like, oh, we've got some deferred maintenance going on here. I didn't get that feeling at
Yeah.
all. It looked very well kept. And I was there on a rainy, gray looking day, and the campus still looked great.
Hmm. And then do you get a sense, I mean, I don't know if you got this from people, just like how intense are the classes academically? Like, I mean, it sounds like they're pretty rigorous, but is it like a super competitive place? Are people more collaborative? Are they spending, it's like all night in the library, like certain other Midwestern schools that we know? What did you get a sense of that?
No, I think this is a really collaborative place. But I do think that this is the kind of place where I feel like students are doing the work during the week, where you might find students, curled up with books, because I think there's going to be a lot of reading and writing here, and you have a really good time on the weekends. So keep in mind, 60 to 70% of these
Right.
students
Hmm.
are in Greek life. So, but it's a small town. Students are staying on campus for the most part, unless they decide to road trip into Indianapolis, or Chicago, or St. Louis, or something like that. But I do not think this is a cutthroat kind of school.
Hmm. So I have a couple more questions, but I think you're probably going to cover them, like about the money and admissions. So
Yeah.
I'll let you go do that, and then I'll ask my final questions.
Let's talk about the money. So, cost of attendance all in is right around 77,000. So that is the whole kit and caboodle. Tuition, room, board, travel fees, but 90% of students pay less than that. And the average need-based package is almost $41,000. So there is financial aid to be had here. They also offer merit aid, and the range of merit is between 10,000 and 48,000. So students could conceivably qualify for both financial aid and need-based aid and merit aid. Those merit aid awards students are considered automatically. And one of the things I like is they have to maintain a 2.75 GPA.
That's not too bad.
That's not too bad. There are some schools out there where it's like, it puts students into a tizzy. Are they going to be able to maintain those GPAs? And that's a cumulative GPA. So I feel like that when you ask about, is it cutthroat? I think that's a good indication there that students are not sweating trying to maintain a 3.75 GPA. They do have other scholarships. The Rector Scholar Awards usually goes to about the top 5% of students. Now, for those students, they do have to maintain a higher GPA, a 3.0. And then the Bonner Scholar Program, which is only open to about 20 students, but it's based on need and their community service. And that program will meet the financial need of those students. And then there are additional scholarships for music students and other students. The school is not need blind, so keep that in mind. So outcomes, average starting salary for the whole, not broken down by particular majors, is $61,000. The top states for graduates to go and continue their life journey are Indiana, Illinois, Florida, Texas, and New York. Their top employers, Eli Lilly, which is based in Indianapolis, IU Health, Teach for America, DePauw University, but number 8 on their top 10 list is JP Morgan. So if students are looking for that big city job, they can get there from DePauw. And the top areas for graduate studies, number 1 is law, then medicine, biology, business, and computer science. So how do you get in? So what they are looking for, rigor and GPA are the most important things for them. They want to see those in your transcript that you have taken tough classes. Letters of recommendation, essays are important, and they do consider demonstrated interest. The overall acceptance rate is right around 64%. The mid-range for GPA is 3.7 to 4.16. Median range for SAT is 1140 to 1360, and for the ACT, 24 to 31. The application, they require your transcripts, school report from your counselor, and then 1 letter of recommendation from a teacher or other rec writer. Test scores are optional, and they can be self-reported. If you don't submit test scores, you are still considered for merit scholarships. They do have an essay, and this year's essay is DePauw's mission is to prepare the leaders the world needs. In what ways do you intend to enhance your leadership strengths during your time at DePauw? And they give you 100 words to fit that in.
That's so mean, you can't even do like two or 3 sentences with that,
I know. That's, but at least it's short. I mean,
I'm going to make this essay longer for future students. That's what my leadership's going to be.
Oh, I know. I thought, oh, well, this is good. And then I saw that 100 words or less, and I thought, oh, that's cruel. Now, this school, they cover all the bases. So they have early action, ED, early action 2, and ED2, and regular decision. So a multitude of ways that you can apply. They are on the Common App, the Coalition for College app, and they have their own application. And of course, no favoritism between any of them. And who do I think this school would be good for?
Yeah, that's my question. Who would the school be good for?
Yeah, I think it's good for students who are academically motivated. So this is a school for students who are engaged. This is not a place where you can hide. It's a small school. You're going to get to know your instructors, whether you want to or not. You're going to be a part of the community. I think it is a place for students who are service-oriented, who are looking to give back. Students who are interested in Greek life. you don't have to be a part of Greek life, but if it is abhorrent to you, I think it's going to be tough to escape on a campus like this. I think it's for students who are looking for a community, because you are going to find that here, whether it's a part of a sorority or a fraternity or a fellows program, or just getting to know your fellow classmates. I mean, that's one of the good things I think about being a residential college for 4 years. You are going to be building a community. And this is for students who are career oriented. I mean, they are looking for students to come out of DePauw and become productive citizens in every meaning of that term. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, it sounds like it's if you're the kind of kid who would really benefit from being in a liberal arts college environment, but you also like fun and, parties and sports and things like that. It seems like it's a really good combination. And sometimes it's actually hard to find that combination. I think things tend to go more towards one or the other. So it definitely sounds like a hidden gem to me. And I really hope that now that they're part of the colleges that change lives, they'll get more national attention. Even those folks from Illinois who, gave it the stink eye before might take a second look.
Yeah, I agree. I hope their profile gets lifted by being a part of colleges that change lives, because I do think it really has something unique to offer, especially, a lot of times with smaller colleges, particularly in the Midwest, you miss out on diversity. And most of the students that we talked with were international students. I mean, I think 20% of your student body is international at a small school like this. That's saying something. And I think that's impressive. So a lot of good things happening at DePauw, and I expect that to continue. So 2 thumbs up.
All right. Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Lisa.
Friends, I'm coming to you from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I'm literally looking out the window, and all I can see is the Atlantic Ocean and its greatness and its vastness. But on Monday's episode, I'm going to talk to you about one of the things that is most confusing about college admissions for everyone, including me. But it's absolutely essential that you understand this. You're going to have to tune in Monday to see what that thing is. We'll also have part 2 of Lisa's excellent interview with Erin Llewellyn, and she'll be helping us debunk myths about Generation Z. Friends, a lot of decisions came out this week. A lot of the early decisions were released. And if you're in a competitive suburban public school or independent school, there's a lot of buzz about who got in. And this is especially pronounced in certain parts of the country. Northern Virginia all the way up through New England is one area. Parts of the North Shore of Chicago is another. South Florida, Palo Alto, parts of LA, just to name a few of the areas where there tends to be a lot of buzz. And those are by all means not the only areas. And what tends to happen is students create this little hierarchy of, oh, this person got in a very good school, and oh, you're going there? Thought you could do better. And it puts a lot of pressure on kids. It puts a lot of pressure on students. So more than ever, it's really important that you do not forget, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do. You get there. That's what you do. You get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. See you on Monday, friends. And Merry Christmas, because I'm literally recording this on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas to all. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses. by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.